Imagine a man who, like, spends his weekends hiking the Swiss Alps, petting cats, playing chess.
Right, just a very quaint intellectual life.
Yeah, exactly. But now imagine that exact same guy calmly signing execution orders for thousands of people.
It's just wild.
He dismantled an entire empire and laid the groundwork for a system that would go on to govern, what, a third of the planet?
Yeah, roughly a third. It is easily one of history's most jarring disconnects. You've got this bourgeois intellectual on one hand, and then the ruthless, unyielding architect of the world's first communist state on the other.
Well, today we are stripping away the Soviet mythology and the Cold War caricatures.
Yep.
We're doing a deep dive into a massive historical biography of Vladimir Lenin.
Right, because we really want to look at the deeply human and honestly terrifyingly pragmatic reality of a man who fundamentally re-engineered the 20th century.
And this matters for you, the listener, whether you consider yourself a history buff or not.
Oh, absolutely. Because Lenin is, he's the ultimate case study in how a single individual's iron will and absolute certainty can completely rewrite global systems. I mean, he didn't just ride the wave of history.
Yeah.
He forcibly bent it to his will.
Okay, let's unpack this origin story, because the guy who destroys the Russian Empire actually came from the very system he ended up crushing.
Yeah, he was born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov in 1870, and his family wasn't poor or oppressed at all.
Right, they were comfortable, well-educated.
Exactly. His parents were actually liberal, conservative monarchists. His father was a school director who he climbed the bureaucratic ranks to earn hereditary noble status.
So they were basically a prominent family in their provincial town.
Yeah, they summered at a rural estate, avoided political radicals entirely. Young Vladimir was this incredibly competitive, brilliant student.
He excelled at the conservative classical school.
He did. If you looked at his life at age 15, you would predict he'd become a high-ranking bureaucrat for the Tsar, not, his executioner.
Mm-hmm. But then the floor just completely falls out from under him, because in 1886, his father dies suddenly of a brain hemorrhage.
Right.
And then just 1 year later, his older brother Alexander, who he called Sasha, goes off to university in St. Petersburg and gets executed by the state.
Yeah, Sasha had joined this revolutionary cell that was caught plotting to assassinate Tsar Alexander III.
With a bomb hidden in a hollowed-out medical dictionary, which is just insane.
It's like something out of a movie. But it was a devastating psychological blow for the family. And what's fascinating here is how we see the first glimpse of Lenin's defining trait.
His ability to just compartmentalize it.
More than that, his ability to turn intense grief and chaos into cold, calculated strategy. I mean, he still graduates top of his class.
Wow.
Yeah, he goes to Kazan University to study law. But internally, he's done with the system. He gets involved in student protests, gets expelled, and is exiled to his family's rural estate.
And that's where he really starts reading, right?
Voraciously. Yeah. Diving into banned texts, especially Karl Marx's Das Kapital.
I think for a lot of us listening, it's really easy to look at this like a standard revenge plot. Like, the emperor killed his brother, so he vows to kill the empire.
Right, like a comic book origin story.
Exactly. But he doesn't actually follow in Sasha's footsteps at all.
No, he actively rejects his brother's methods. Sasha was part of a movement rooted in agrarian populism.
Wait, let's pause on that. Agrarian populism.
Yeah.
So his brother thought, like, arming the rural farmers and killing the king was the shortcut to freedom.
Essentially, yes. They believed dramatic acts of individual terror would spark a mass peasant uprising. But Lenin looks at Russia and realizes the world is changing.
Because of industrialization.
Exactly. He determines the real lever of power isn't out in the rural wheat fields, it's in the urban factories. So he embraces Marxism, which argues that the industrial working class, the proletariat, is the true vehicle for revolution.
So throwing a bomb at one monarch doesn't actually dismantle the systemic autocracy.
Precisely. To tear down the machine, you need to build a stronger, more disciplined machine.
So he starts building that machine. He moves to St. Petersburg, becomes a Marxist activist, and, well, predictably, gets arrested.
Right. Standard hazard of the job back then.
Yeah. By 1897, the state exiles him to Siberia for 3 years. But this isn't like the brutal, frozen labor camp we associate with the later Soviet Gulag.
Not at all.
His exile sounds surprisingly domestic.
It really was. The Tsarist exile system for political dissidents of his class was remarkably lax. I mean, he had his own room.
He spent his days swimming in the river.
Yeah, swimming, hunting snipe, translating English literature. He even marries a fellow Marxist, Nadia Kripskaya, while out there.
So it was more like a forced intellectual retreat.
Basically, it was a period of intense intellectual incubation. But he knows he can't actually run a revolution from a Siberian cabin.
Right. So when his sentence ends in 1900, he just leaves Russia entirely.
Bouncing between Munich, London, Geneva, and this is when he officially adopts the pseudonym Lenin.
Probably after the Lena River in Siberia.
Likely, yeah. And he starts building a clandestine network through an underground newspaper called Iskra, which translates to the spark.
So the newspaper is a way to smuggle ideas, but also to organize people.
Exactly. It connected isolated revolutionary cells. And it's during this European period that Lenin drops a massive ideological bombshell.
This is the 1903 Party Conference in London.
Right. He essentially forces the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party to split in two.
The famous Bolshevik and Menshevik split. But wait, why did they fracture? Weren't they all on the same side trying to overthrow the Tsar?
They shared the same goal, but envisioned entirely different methods. The Mensheviks wanted a broad, inclusive democratic party. If you supported the cause, you could join.
Which sounds pretty standard for a political party.
Right. But Lenin completely rejects that. He argues that a loose movement of dreamers and part-timers will just get crushed by the Tsar's secret police.
So he wants, what, a specialized task force?
He demands a strict, exclusive vanguard party of professional revolutionaries. People whose sole full-time job is dismantling the state. And he takes control of the faction that calls itself the Bolsheviks, meaning majoritarians.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because you have a guy demanding a highly disciplined, full-time professional army of revolutionaries. But professionals need to be paid.
They do.
So to fund this vanguard, Lenin greenlights a wave of violent crime. He literally endorses robbing post offices, trains, and banks.
Yeah, it's quite the pivot from reading in the British Library.
It's crazy. The most infamous one is the 1907 Tiflis bank robbery, a massive armed heist executed by a group that included a young militant named Joseph Stalin.
Right, Stalin was involved in the logistics of that one.
It's like a university professor moonlighting as a mob boss to fund his research. How does he justify that?
Well, the contradiction makes perfect sense once you grasp Lenin's core moral framework. One of the biographies we looked at highlights that Lenin didn't believe in universal morality.
Meaning what? Good and bad didn't exist?
His only ethical metric was, does this action advance the revolution? If robbing a bank buys printing presses and weapons to overthrow an oppressive autocracy, then the robbery isn't just acceptable, it is a moral imperative.
Wow. So the end absolutely justifies the means.
100%.
Okay, so Lenin is sitting in Europe with this highly disciplined, heavily armed vanguard party. But a party needs a crisis to actually seize power.
And in 1914, Europe hands him the biggest crisis in human history, World War I.
Right. Most socialists around Europe were horrified by the war, but they eventually, supported their respective nations.
And Lenin was furious at them for that. He viewed World War I purely as an imperialist bloodbath, just capitalists forcing the working class to slaughter each other for colonial profit.
But he also saw it as an opportunity, didn't he?
A golden opportunity. He actively campaigned to transform this international war into a continent-wide civil war.
He actually wanted the soldiers in the trenches to turn their rifles around and shoot their own commanding officers.
Precisely. He argued that the real enemy wasn't the German worker in the opposite trench. It was the Russian officer giving the order to charge.
And the pressure of that war finally breaks Russia. Fast forward to February 1917. Massive food shortages and riots force Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate.
Right, a provisional government takes over.
This is the moment Lenin has been waiting for his entire life. The empire is falling, and he is stuck in Switzerland.
Exactly. The borders are completely sealed because of the war.
He's desperate to get back to Petrograd to hijack the revolution before it, stabilizes into a liberal democracy.
Which leads to one of the most jaw-dropping strategic maneuvers of the 20th century. Lenin reaches out to the German government.
Keep in mind, Germany is currently slaughtering Russian troops on the Eastern Front.
They are actively at war. But the German high command realizes that Lenin's platform includes pulling Russia out of the conflict immediately.
Right.
So Germany decides to pack Lenin and a few dozen other radicals into a single train car, lock the doors, and ship them across enemy lines directly into Russia. They literally weaponized him.
It's the ultimate geopolitical Trojan horse. Infect the enemy capital with a revolutionary virus to knock them out of the war.
And the German gamble works in the short term, but obviously backfires spectacularly on the global stage later on.
Yeah, to put it mildly.
When Lenin steps off that train at the Finland station in Petrograd, the local socialists are expecting him to compromise and work with the new provisional government.
But he doesn't do that at all.
No, he drops his April theses. He demands no support for the government, an immediate end to the war, and demands that all power be transferred to the Soviets.
And the Soviets were the local workers' councils, right?
Exactly.
I want to drill down on something here, because he's fundamentally rewriting Marxist theory on the fly, isn't he?
He is. Orthodox Marxism, at the time, stated that human society had to evolve in stages.
Like a ladder you have to climb.
Right. You had to have a long, prosperous capitalist phase with a bourgeois democracy before the working class could eventually transition to socialism.
But Russia was barely industrialized.
According to the textbook, they weren't ready. But Lenin pragmatically abandons the textbook. He insists the Russian proletariat can bypass the capitalist phase entirely and seize power right now.
Which leads directly to October 1917. The Bolsheviks organize armed militias, primarily soldiers and sailors. They march on the Winter Palace, the seat of the provisional government, and execute a virtually bloodless coup.
The opposition just sort of melts away.
Lenin is named the chairman of the new government. Against all odds, the guy who was hunting snipe in Siberia and studying in British libraries just seized control of the largest country on Earth.
But seizing the palace is the easy part.
Right.
Holding on to power while the entire country collapses around you is a totally different reality.
And this is where the story gets incredibly dark. Because before the Bolsheviks took over, the previous government had scheduled nationwide democratic elections for a constituent assembly.
And Lenin actually allows the vote to happen.
But the results are disaster for him.
Total disaster. The Bolsheviks only secure about a quarter of the vote. A rival agrarian socialist party wins the majority.
So how does the architect of the People's Revolution handle losing a democratic election?
He destroys the election.
Just shuts it down.
Yeah, after the assembly meets for exactly 1 day, Lenin sends heavily armed sailors to lock the doors. He didn't use a clever political maneuver. He used brute physical force.
Banking on the fact that the opposition was too disorganized to fight back.
Exactly. He argued the assembly didn't reflect the quote-unquote true will of the workers. It was the definitive end of any multi-party democratic experiment in Russia.
Then he has to deal with the Germans. To fulfill his promise of peace, he signs the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, and the terms are just jaw-dropping.
They really are.
Lenin gives up 26% of the former Russian Empire's population, a third of its agricultural land, and most of its coal and iron reserves to Germany, just to buy peace.
It was wildly unpopular. It even sparked furious backlash within his own party.
I bet.
But Lenin calculated that if the German army kept advancing, they would completely crush his fragile government. He needed breathing room to solidify control at home.
But that brutal treaty, combined with disbanding the assembly, does the exact opposite of securing his power. It unites all of his enemies, monarchists, liberals, rival socialists, foreign powers, and plunges Russia into a devastating civil war.
And it's during this desperate fight for survival that Lenin's government unleashes the Red Terror.
Right.
They establish the Cheka, a ruthless secret police force operating completely above the law. We see massive state-sanctioned violence become a tool of governance.
We need to talk about the scale of this violence, because it wasn't just battlefield casualties. Lenin explicitly authorized the execution of thousands of perceived political enemies.
Including the Romanov family.
Yeah, the former Tsar, his wife, and their 5 children who were all shot in a basement. The sources we looked at note that Lenin viewed their deaths as a necessary political finality.
Kind of similar to the French Revolution beheading Louis XVI to prevent any royalist restoration.
Right. And he also sends telegrams ordering the public hanging of kulaks, which were wealthier peasants, to suppress rural uprisings. And they established the first iteration of forced labor camps.
And when you review the historical records, the legacy is deeply, deeply polarized.
We definitely want to keep this balance based on the sources.
Right. Supporters point out that under Lenin's rule, unprecedented steps were taken toward anti-imperialism, ending the war, establishing workers' control over industry, introducing the 8-hour workday,
Emancipating women, launching massive literacy campaigns that taught millions of peasants to read.
Exactly. But on the flip side, critics condemn him for dismantling democracy, creating a terrifying police state, and overseeing the systematic killing of tens of thousands of people.
So what does this all mean? I think for a lot of us listening, it's hard to reconcile the idea of a utopian visionary with a man sending telegrams demanding public hangings. Was it sheer hypocrisy, or did he actually believe he was doing the right thing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand his mindset, you have to look at how he defined the state itself. Okay. Lenin didn't view government as a neutral referee trying to help people get along. He believed the state, by definition, was an instrument of class violence.
So the police, the courts, the prisons.
They were just tools the rich used to crush the poor. Therefore, to smash the old order, he believed a temporary, unyielding terror against the former ruling classes was a mathematical necessity.
He didn't delight in the violence sadistically, but he viewed it as a brutal, unavoidable surgery required to birth a classless, stateless, violence-free communist society. But that violence-free society never arrives. Instead, the violence starts consuming the revolution. By 1921, the Bolsheviks have won the Civil War, but the country is completely ruined.
Millions have died from famine and disease.
And then comes a massive turning point, the Kronstadt Rebellion.
Right. Kronstadt was a naval base outside Petrograd. And the sailors there had been the vanguard of Lenin's revolution in 1917.
His most loyal guys.
Exactly. But by 1921, disgusted by the dictatorial reality of Bolshevik rule and the forced requisitioning of peasant grain, these very sailors rise up. They demand free elections and an end to the Bolshevik monopoly on power.
His most loyal foot soldiers are turning their guns on him.
And Lenin orders the Red Army to ruthlessly crush the rebellion, which they do. But the fact that his most fervent supporters mutinied shakes him to his core.
He realizes the system is on the verge of total collapse.
Right. If the people keep starving, the Bolsheviks will be overthrown.
So this forces Lenin to do something shocking. He completely pivots. He introduces the new economic policy, or the NEP.
Yeah.
To save the country from starving, he essentially brings back capitalism. He allows free markets, lets peasants sell their surplus grain for profit, and permits small private businesses to operate.
He openly called it state capitalism.
I imagine the hardliners were not happy about that.
Many hardline communists were furious. They accused him of betraying the revolution. But Lenin was nothing if not a supreme pragmatist. If ideology was killing the country, ideology had to be temporarily shelved.
And the crazy thing is the NEP actually works. The economy begins to stabilize. Food returns to the markets.
It's an incredible comeback. He steers the country out of a nosedive.
But just as he regains economic control, he completely loses physical control. Starting in 1922, Lenin's health deteriorates rapidly.
He suffers a series of severe strokes.
He becomes partially paralyzed and eventually loses his ability to speak.
And from his sickbed, his sharp mind is trapped in a failing body. He realizes he is losing control of the massive bureaucratic machine he built.
So in his final months, he dictates a document that becomes known as Lenin's Testament.
Right.
In it, he assesses the party leadership, and he issues a stark, specific warning about one man in particular, Joseph Stalin.
He writes that Stalin is, quote-unquote, too crude, and urges the party to find a way to remove him from the position of general secretary.
But he was too late, right?
Yeah, way too late. Stalin had already been quietly using his administrative position to stack the bureaucracy with his loyalists. Stalin actually takes charge of Lenin's medical regimen.
Wow.
Yeah, effectively placing him under house arrest and isolating him from the rest of the government. Lenin is forced to watch helplessly as the man he increasingly distrusts consolidates total power.
It's like building a highly secure vault to lock away your enemies, only to realize on your deathbed that you're locked inside, and the guy you trust least has the only combination.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Lenin dies in January 1924 at just 53 years old.
And the irony of what happens next is profound, because Lenin personally lived a very austere life. He despised bureaucracy and absolutely hated the concept of a cult of personality.
He just wanted to be buried.
Yeah. But Stalin ignores his and his widow's wishes completely. Stalin has Lenin's brain removed for scientific study and his body permanently embalmed and placed on display.
He turns Lenin into a mummified, quasi-religious icon.
Exactly. He creates a dogmatic state religion out of Leninism to legitimize his own dictatorial reign.
This raises an important question, though.
It does. The very system of absolute centralization that Lenin designed to bypass democracy was the exact mechanism Stalin used to take over.
Because Lenin laid the framework.
Right. He created the one-party state, the secret police, the ban on internal political factions. He genuinely believed his own intellect and dedication to the working class could safely control those volatile tools.
But once he was gone, Those tools were left lying on the table, fully loaded, for whoever was ruthless enough to pick them up.
Precisely.
It brings us to the end of an incredibly polarizing life. The brilliant provincial student shattered by family trauma, the intellectual who sat in libraries plotting the downfall of empires,
The pragmatist who rebuilt a broken country.
and the tyrant who ordered the executions of thousands. You really cannot understand the modern world without understanding the shadow he cast.
I'd leave you with a final thought from the historical debates we reviewed. We saw Lenin pivot to the new economic policy, bringing back some free enterprise to save the country.
Right.
If those strokes hadn't happened, if Lenin had lived another 20 years, would the 20th century have seen a more flexible, pragmatic Soviet state? Or was the totalitarian nightmare of Stalinism already irrevocably set in stone by the very tools of terror and centralization that Lenin himself forged to seize power in the first place?
It makes you wonder. We look back at history expecting a clean equation of cause and effect. But when you dive into the life of a man who could gently stroke his pet cat while drafting execution orders, you realize just how messy human history really is.
It really is.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep reading, and we'll see you next time.